I woke up on my 58th birthday, convinced the worst thing that could happen that morning was my lower back locking again. That was before I discovered my husband's 30-year secret. Before Brooklyn, before the truth, before the kind of heartbreak that doesn't shatter you, but hollows you out quietly. But at 7:12 a.m., the only thing on my mind was coffee and survival. The house was cold. The kind of cold that makes you question all your life choices. I shuffled into the kitchen wearing a silk robe that once made me feel glamorous, but now just reminded me how gravity worked. My Starbucks pod machine blinked like it was annoyed at me for aging. I pressed the button anyway. While the machine groaned to life, I checked my iPhone. I had to enlarge the font, again, because my eyes had decided to retire early. When the message bubbles filled the whole screen, I finally saw Linda's text. Happy 58th, darling. Remember, at our age, flirting counts as cardio. I snorted. My cholesterol already does enough exercise. I muttered. Richard was upstairs, humming this irritatingly cheerful tune he always hummed when he was feeling proud of himself. He'd promised me a romantic dinner at the Plaza Hotel that night. I have a special gift for you, he'd said, with that silky tone men use when they want credit for things they haven't done yet. I poured my coffee, inhaled, exhaled, tried to feel grateful for still being alive at 58. Then, because my life is apparently directed by someone with a dark sense of humor, I walked over to fix Richard's winter coat, and that's when it happened. A folded receipt fell out of the inner pocket like a small white bong. Tiffany Co. My first thought was ridiculous. Oh my God, he remembered. Maybe after all the years of predictable gifts, scarves, candles, one regrettable air fryer, he finally bought me something meaningful. My heart did a little flutter. Not romantic, cardiac. Still, a flutter. I opened the receipt. One platinum necklace, one heart pendant, engraving to Julia, 30 years of us. I froze so hard my joints made a sound. The kitchen lights buzzed above me. Somewhere outside a bird chirped, deeply unaware of the marital disaster unfolding on my tiles. Julia, 30 years, the exact length of my marriage. For a full 10 seconds I wondered if maybe, just maybe, he'd misspelled Maggie in some sort of romantic stroke-induced confusion. But no, the letters stayed where they were, bold and cruel. I swallowed, my chest tightening the way it does when you're not sure if you're having an emotional breakdown or just indigestion. I refolded the receipt with the precision of a surgeon and slipped it back in. Years of being a good wife had trained me to clean up even emotional crime scenes. Just as the numbness set in, the landline rang. Nobody calls the landline except spammers and death. Hello, I said, bracing myself. A cheerful voice chirped, "Good morning. Calling to confirm a flower delivery for tonight." My grip tightened. A what? Yes, ma'am, a large bouquet for a Brooklyn Heights address. The message reads, "Thank you for 30 years of family. Love R." Isn't that sweet? Sweet. In that moment the world didn't explode. It didn't fall apart. It narrowed, sharp, cold, and painfully clear. "Ma'am, is the message correct?" the woman asked. I stared at the receipt, at the name Julia, at the words 30 years, my birthday, my life. "Yes," I finally said, my voice steadier than my pulse. "Everything is correct. Everything was wrong. And my birthday had just begun." I don't remember deciding to leave the house. One moment I was staring at the landline like it had personally betrayed me, and the next I was fully dressed, coat zipped, purse slung over my shoulder, standing in my driveway like a woman about to commit either bravery or felony. Richard had taken our Mercedes to Manhattan, so I didn't even have the satisfaction of slamming the door of something expensive. I considered driving his old Toyota, but the universe had already mocked me enough for one birthday. So I called a yellow cab. "Where to?" the driver asked. My mouth answered before my brain caught up. "Fifth Avenue. Tiffany Co." The driver raised an eyebrow through the mirror, the way people do when they think they're witnessing the prequel to a meltdown. To be fair, he wasn't wrong. New York blurred past the cab window. Highway, skyline, the gray-blue winter lights sliding across buildings like cold fingers. My heart thudded somewhere near my throat. I tried breathing exercises I saw online, except I forgot the steps halfway through because apparently betrayal is distracting. My iPhone buzzed. "Linda, how's your big romantic birthday morning going? Did he give you a Cartier ring? A private jet? A younger version of himself?" I typed slowly. partly because my fingers shook, partly because the iPhone keyboard suddenly felt microscopic. I'm going to Tiffany. 3 dots appeared. Then, OMG, are you buying yourself jewelry? Finally. I sighed and turned the phone face down. If I told her the truth, she would appear out of thin air with a baseball bat and a questionable plan. Traffic thickened as we neared Fifth Avenue. When the cab finally dropped me off in front of the iconic Tiffany building, I stood there for a moment, clutching my purse. The winter air bit at my cheeks. The revolving doors glittered. Everything looked elegant and stable, 2 things my life no longer was. Inside, the store glowed softly, like a museum built to worship good taste and bad financial decisions. A young sales associate approached with the bright smile of someone who thought love was still simple. Good morning. How may I assist you today? I handed her the folded receipt. I'm here about an order my husband placed. She scanned it. Her smile faltered just enough for me to notice. Yes, of course, the necklace is ready for pickup, one of our more sentimental pieces. For Julia, I said quietly. She blinked, a tiny, reflexive gesture that told me she understood too much and nothing at all. Would you like to verify the pickup details? Yes, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. She tapped on her tablet. It's scheduled for late afternoon. Pickup and delivery to a Brooklyn Heights address. She hesitated. It notes a special celebration. A celebration. On my birthday. Thank you, I whispered. Somehow I managed to turn and walk out without collapsing into a display case. The cold outside slapped me again. This time, I welcomed it. I sat on a bench near the corner of Fifth Avenue and pulled out my notes app. My hands shook so much I kept typing nonsense letters. I deleted them and began. Tiffany purchase, engraving, 30 years of us, flowers to Brooklyn, Julia, what else? What else have I not seen? A gust of wind flipped my scarf into my face like a fabric attack. I peeled it away, muttering, "Oh yes, universe, please continue." I closed my eyes for a moment. The traffic hummed around me. Somewhere a street performer played a slow jazz tune. People rushed past with shopping bags, holiday scarves, lives that weren't imploding. I opened my eyes, and something settled in me. Not peace, not anger. Direction. If Richard had spent 30 years crafting lies, I could spend one afternoon finding the truth. I stood, walked to the curb, raised my hand, and hailed another cab. Where to? The driver asked. I looked straight ahead. Brooklyn Heights, please. The cab rolled deeper into Brooklyn, past quiet tree-lined streets that had no idea a woman's entire marriage was unraveling in the back seat. I pressed my palm against the cold window, staring at rows of brownstones that looked like they'd been painted into place. Warm brick, tall windows, black iron railings. Peaceful. Steady. Everything I wasn't. When the cab stopped at the corner, my legs hesitated before I stepped out. The winter air here felt different. Heavier, like it knew things I didn't. I walked slowly down the block, pretending I belonged there. Maybe I did, in some alternate universe where my husband didn't engrave jewelry for mysterious women named Julia. Then I saw the house. A brownstone with a wreath on the door, soft lights glowing through the curtains, and a stroller parked neatly on the front step. My stomach tightened so hard it hurt. I took 2 steps closer, and then the door opened. Richard walked out. He wasn't rushing, he wasn't stressed, he wasn't the man who claimed he had back-to-back meetings all morning. He looked relaxed, almost cheerful, carrying a bakery box tied with a gold ribbon. A celebration cake. For someone else. On my birthday. I ducked behind a street tree, an actual physical tree, feeling wildly ungraceful, but committed. At 58, crouching was no longer a casual activity. My knees made a noise I can only describe as wooden furniture being moved improperly. Richard stepped aside to let someone else out. A woman in her mid-50s appeared first. Soft brown hair, kind face, wearing a cozy wool sweater. She greeted him with a familiarity that hit me like a punch. Then a younger woman, maybe 30, joined her, holding the hand of a little boy with round cheeks and a dinosaur backpack. The little boy's eyes lit up. Grandpa! I grabbed the tree trunk so hard bark got under my nails. Grandpa. He wasn't just cheating, he wasn't just lying. He'd been living a second life so complete it had grandchildren. Richard bent down, arms wide, and hugged the boy with a tenderness I hadn't seen in years. My breath hitched. Not jealousy. Grief. Grief for the man I thought I knew. Grief for the life I thought I had. The older woman, Julia I assumed, kissed Richard on the cheek. The younger one, the daughter, stepped aside so he could enter. "Everything's ready inside," she said. 30 years, Julia added softly. "We made it. 30 years." The same words engraved on the necklace, the same message on the flower card, the same length as my marriage. My vision blurred. I blinked until the brownstone steadied again. I shifted to the side, trying to breathe quietly, when my foot stepped on a patch of ice. My entire body lurched forward, and I had to grab the tree, again, to avoid introducing my face to the sidewalk. The tree creaked under my grip, possibly judging me. The younger woman suddenly turned her head, scanning the street as if she'd sensed something. My heart slammed into my ribs. I held perfectly still, clutching the tree like a woman hugging a confused relative. She took a few steps down the stoop, squinting into the cold air. Her gaze swept right past me. Thank God for winter coats that blend into tree bark. And then she pulled her phone out. "Mom," she said, "I think tonight might really be the night." A pause. He said he's finally gonna tell her. Tell her. The words hit harder than the cold. Who was her? Me? Someone else? Another woman entirely? I had fallen so far down the rabbit hole I didn't know which plot twist was next. She tucked her phone away, gave the street one last glance, and went back inside, shutting the door gently behind her. The brownstone lights glowed warm and golden, like a perfect holiday card. I stood outside in the freezing air, gripping the tree, blinking at the doorway that held 3 decades of lies. On my birthday. My 58th birthday. The cold stung my face, but it wasn't the cold that made my eyes water. I wasn't planning to move. My fingers were still curled around the tree like I'd fused with it. But life doesn't care about your emotional paralysis, because at that moment, the younger woman stepped outside again. She wrapped her coat tight and walked down the front steps, heading straight toward the sidewalk. Straight toward me. My body attempted something resembling stealth. I pressed myself behind the tree, which, may I remind you, was not a big tree. It was the kind of tree you tie balloons to for a birthday party. At 58, hiding behind it required geometry and prayer. Her footsteps crunched on the thin layer of frost. My heart performed a drum solo. She stopped a few feet away and pulled out her phone. "Yes," she whispered into the receiver. "He's inside. Mom's setting the table." A pause. "I think tonight is when he finally tells her." My mouth went dry. Tell her what? Tell who? Tell me? Tell Julia? Tell some third mystery woman? At this point, nothing would have surprised me, not even learning he was secretly vlogging his double life. She sighed, sounding exhausted. He promised he would. 30 years? You can't hide something this long forever. Well, apparently you can. He was doing a fantastic job until today. She hung up and looked around again, and this time her gaze landed directly on me. My spine locked, my soul left my body. Even the tree seemed to whisper, "You're on your own, lady." She took a hesitant step forward. Hi? Are you okay?" I blinked at her, then realized the only thing worse than being spotted was being spotted while clinging to a tree like a dehydrated raccoon. So I let go, slowly, with dignity, or as much dignity as a woman with stiff knees could manage. "Oh, yes, fine," I said brightly, "just stretching." Her eyebrows lifted. "Behind a tree?" "I'm a nervous stretcher." A small, polite silence stretched between us. To her credit, she didn't run. "I live nearby," she said cautiously. "I don't think I've seen you around?" I forced a smile I hoped looked casual and not deranged. "I'm visiting. Just walking, enjoying the tree population." She gave a soft laugh, thank God, and stepped a little closer. Up close she looked kind, tired, human. Not the villain my fear had painted. "I'm Grace," she said finally. "My mom and I live here, and my son, and..." She gestured vaguely toward the house. "Him." Her voice changed slightly when she said him. Not angry, uncertain. I swallowed. "You've known him a long time?" "All my life." She pushed a strand of hair behind her ear. "He wasn't always around. I didn't meet him until I was 20. He said things were complicated." She looked down. "He told us he had a wife who didn't love him, that she left him years ago." My stomach twisted. I imagined the version of me he'd built. A ghost, a villain, a convenient lie. "I'm sorry," I said quietly, surprised it came out sincere, because she wasn't my enemy. She was another person standing in the blast radius of Richard's choices. She studied my face more closely. "You look like you know him too." My throat tightened. "I did," I whispered. "For a very long time." Something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, suspicion, a puzzle piece clicking halfway in. You're not. She paused. Are you the someone he's supposed to talk to tonight? I opened my mouth. I closed my mouth. I realized I had no idea how to answer. Before I could speak, a voice echoed from the house. Grace, honey, we need you inside. She turned back toward the brownstone. Coming. She hesitated, then looked at me again. If you're waiting for him, I hope he tells you the truth. Then she walked away, climbing the steps, disappearing into the warm glow of the home that wasn't supposed to exist. I stood frozen on the sidewalk. She hoped he'd tell me the truth. But I was starting to understand something sharp and unmistakable. He'd already told her a version of it, just not the version where I existed. I don't know how I got home. The cab ride back to Westchester felt like drifting through fog. Cold air, gray sky, holiday lights blinking in shop windows like nothing in the world had gone wrong. My body moved on instinct, but my mind stayed on that brownstone doorstep, replaying the words. He said you didn't love him. He said you left. I walked into my house, a place I'd polished and decorated and called home for 30 years, and for the first time it felt like a museum exhibit about a woman who no longer existed. My reflection stared back at me from the hallway mirror. Pale, tired, 58, but still standing. I'd half expected to see the word fool written across my forehead in Sharpie. Upstairs, I turned on the shower and just stood there, letting the steam rise, hoping the hot water would wash away the ache in my chest. I didn't cry, not because I was strong, but because shock holds your tears hostage. When I came out, I wrapped myself in the softest robe I owned, a gift from Richard years ago. It suddenly felt like borrowing clothes from a stranger. I checked the time, 5:24 p.m. Our dinner reservation at the Plaza Hotel was in 90 minutes. A laugh escaped me, a short, bitter one. My husband was probably still in Brooklyn, playing grandfather of the year, eating a cake baked in celebration of a life I wasn't part of. And yet, he'd show up tonight wearing a perfect suit, smiling like he'd invented romance. Part of me wanted to cancel, crawl into bed, and let the world think I'd vanished. But another part of me, the part that had survived heartbreak, menopause, 3 decades of unpaid emotional labor, and one truly awful haircut in 1997, sat up straighter. If he wanted to play pretend tonight, I could pretend better. I went to my closet and pulled out the black dress I saved for rare occasions. It wasn't flashy, but it fit well. Hugged the parts of me that still remembered how to be beautiful, and smoothed over the parts that preferred sweaters. I added simple heels, pearl earrings, and my old Cartier bracelet. The one he gave me on our 25th anniversary, engraved with a promise he apparently forgot the moment he left Tiffany's that day. While applying mascara, my hand trembled only once. Not bad for a woman preparing to dine with a man who'd rewritten her out of his life. Downstairs, I grabbed my coat and headed out. My Uber driver was young, cheerful, and blissfully unaware of my emotional crisis. Halfway to Manhattan, he glanced at me through the mirror and said, "Big night?" "Something like that," I replied. He nodded sagely like he understood deep, existential betrayal. "If you're meeting someone special, you look amazing for it." The compliment was kind, unexpected, and so sweet it almost made me laugh. "Thank you, he'll appreciate the effort." "I bet he will," the driver said. Spoiler, he would not. The Plaza Hotel lobby was warm and glowing with golden Christmas lights. People took photos near the giant tree, children twirled in holiday outfits, the air smelled like cinnamon and expensive perfume. It felt surreal walking through luxury when part of my heart was still shivering in front of a brownstone in Brooklyn. Richard arrived right on time. He spotted me near the fountain and smiled, wide, confident, unbothered, like a man who had not spent the afternoon celebrating 30 years with another family. "Wow, Maggie," he said, kissing my cheek. "You look stunning." "Thank you," I said, steadying my voice. "You look like someone who had a very full day." He chuckled. "Meetings, you know how it is." Oh, I knew. We were seated at a private table with a view of Fifth Avenue. The waiter poured champagne. Richard raised his glass first. "To my one and only," he said. My stomach twisted. But I lifted my glass too, because pretending was suddenly very easy. "To your special day," I said softly. He smiled, pleased with himself, having no idea that the special gift I was planning for him wasn't wrapped in Tiffany blue, but in the cold, hard truth. I didn't sleep that night. I lay beside Richard in our California king bed while he snored softly, blissfully unaware that his entire double life was unraveling in my mind like a snagged thread. Every exhale of his felt like a tap on my shoulder. You still don't know everything. By sunrise, I was done being passive. I got up quietly, put on a sweater, made myself Starbucks coffee, and sat at the kitchen island scrolling through my phone contacts. My niece Claire had mentioned a friend of hers, someone who handled corporate and financial cases with a reputation for uncovering things people desperately wanted hidden. I texted her, "Is your friend Noah still taking clients?" She replied instantly, "For you, he'll take you in 5 minutes." What happened? I ignored the second question. By 10 a.m., I was on the train heading toward Manhattan, clutching a folder filled with printed bank statements, tax returns, and little notes I'd scribbled at 3 a.m. when adrenaline disguised itself as clarity. I even brought that cursed Tiffany receipt, folded, unfolded, and refolded so many times it was developing emotional trauma of its own. Noah's office sat on Park Avenue, in one of those tall glass buildings that make you feel like you should have worn heels and made better life choices. I checked my reflection in the elevator door. I didn't look broken. I looked sharpened. His assistant escorted me into a corner office overlooking Midtown. And there he was. You know how some people look like their job? He did. Clean lines, steady posture, neutral tie. But his eyes were warm, the kind that made you feel like he actually listened instead of waiting for you to stop talking. "Mrs. Collins?" he asked, standing to shake my hand. "Just Maggie," I said. My palm was ice cold, his wasn't. He gestured toward a seat. "Claire said you wanted an urgent consult. What can I help you with?" I opened the folder, took a breath, and let 30 years spill onto the table. Tiffany receipts, flower orders, bank statements with withdrawals I'd never made, transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. My voice wavered only once when I said, "I found out yesterday, on my birthday." He didn't interrupt, not once. He read every line like it was a chapter in a story he already suspected the ending of. When he finished, he leaned back, clasped his hands, and exhaled slowly. "All right," he said gently. "Let me walk you through what we're looking at." He pointed to one bank statement. "This account, your inheritance from your parents, has been used for payments to a property management fund in Brooklyn." My stomach tightened. "The brownstone?" "Likely." He tapped another document. "This signature isn't yours, it looks traced. If so, that's fraud, serious fraud." I felt a cold ripple move through me. Fraud sounded so clinical compared to what it actually was, a betrayal that involved ink and intention. Noah continued, "If he misreported assets during tax filings, and some of these transfers suggest that, he could be facing not only civil consequences but criminal scrutiny." Criminal. I blinked slowly, letting the word settle like ash. Seeing my expression, he softened. "I know this is a lot, but you need to hear something important." He paused until I met his eyes. "People who lie to their spouse usually leave a trail. People who've lied for 30 years? They leave a highway." A short, surprised laugh escaped me. It wasn't joy. It was relief to feel anything that wasn't panic. "I don't want revenge," I said. "I want the truth, and I want what's mine protected." He nodded. "That's what I do." We went through each document slowly. The more he explained, the more I felt the numbness lift, replaced by a strange clarity. For the first time since yesterday, I wasn't drowning. I was swimming, badly, awkwardly, but forward. When we finished, Noah closed the folder and looked at me with remarkable kindness. "You've survived a lot," he said. "Now let's make sure you don't lose more than you already have." My throat tightened. For one terrifying moment, I thought I might cry. But crying in front of a handsome attorney 16 years younger felt like a crime against dignity. So instead, I inhaled, straightened my sweater, and said, "Where do we start?" He smiled, not flirtatious but steady, grounding. "We start," he said, "by gathering everything he never wanted you to see." I spent the next few days living 2 lives, just like Richard, except mine required more Advil. By day I was the same quiet wife arranging fresh tulips on the dining table, folding laundry and asking Richard about his meetings with the tone of a woman who hadn't seen the receipts proving otherwise. By night, I became something far more dangerous. A menopausal detective with a good lawyer. I started small. Passwords, patterns, emails left open on his iPad, bank envelopes he thought I never noticed. Funny how marriage trains you to clean around a man's secrets. Now I was collecting them. To keep things subtle, I hid my USB drive in an old chamomile tea tin. When I opened the cabinet and saw 20 nearly identical tins, it hit me that Richard had never, not once, made himself a cup of tea. 30 years of marriage, and the man couldn't identify chamomile from potting soil. If irony were calories, I'd be model thin. One afternoon, when he left for a client lunch, I quietly picked up his jacket from the mudroom and checked the pockets. I found a crumpled receipt for a Brooklyn bakery, a Manhattan parking stub, and, oh, of course, a mint he'd stolen from a restaurant. The man lied like a pro but couldn't resist free candy. I placed every new clue into a folder marked household repairs, because nothing says do not open like chores. A few days later, I texted Grace. Not the smartest decision I ever made. But something in her eyes that day had told me she wasn't the villain in my story. She was someone else's collateral damage. We met at a Starbucks in Brooklyn, halfway between her world and mine. I arrived early, grabbed a corner table, and ordered a latte I didn't really want, but held anyway because it gave my shaking hands a purpose. When Grace walked in, she looked nervous and hopeful at the same time. "Thank you for meeting me," she said. "Thank you for not calling the police when you saw me hiding behind a tree," I replied. Her lips twitched. "You looked determined." That's the nicest possible way to describe what I looked like. She sat down, fingers wrapped around her cup. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We were two strangers connected by the same man, sitting in a coffee shop pretending this was normal when nothing about it was. "I need to ask you something," she said softly. "Were you close to him?" I exhaled. Closer than he ever admitted. She studied my face, confusion twisting slowly into understanding. Then her eyes widened in a soft, devastating way. "You're her," she whispered. "The wife." I nodded. Her breath caught. She set her cup down slowly, like she suddenly didn't trust her hands. "He told us you left him years ago, that he tried to make things right, that you moved on." Moved on. I nearly laughed. After paying his bills, organizing his life, buying his multivitamins, washing 30 years of his socks? Moved on? But Grace looked shattered, so I swallowed every bitter comeback. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly, voice breaking. "I didn't know. Mom didn't know. We thought," she wiped her cheek, "we thought he was the one being hurt." A knife twisted in my chest. Not anger, not jealousy, but grief for all the ways this man had fragmented the truth and handed each piece to a different woman. Grace covered her face with both hands. "He lied to us too." I reached out slowly and placed a hand on hers. It surprised both of us. "We're not enemies," I said quietly. "We were kept in separate stories." Her shoulders trembled. "What do we do now?" I thought of Noah, his calm voice, his steady hands, his promise to uncover what had been buried. "We find the truth," I said. "All of it." Grace nodded, tears slipping over her fingers. When she finally looked up, there wasn't blame in her eyes, only relief that she wasn't alone anymore. A strange sense of strength filled me. Maybe the first real strength I'd felt in years. And for the first time since my birthday, I wasn't just surviving. I was preparing. Richard had always loved grand gestures, public toasts, holiday surprises, expensive dinners that made him look like a devoted husband. So when I told him I wanted to celebrate properly after my birthday, he didn't question it. He simply suggested a restaurant with a waterfront view of Manhattan, the kind of place where the menu doesn't bother printing prices. Perfect. Let him think he was stepping into one of his productions. He had no idea I'd rewritten the script. Noah helped arrange everything. He didn't tell me what to say or how to feel. He just made sure the right people would be in the right place. His calm voice steadied me every time doubt tried creeping in. On the night of the dinner, I arrived first. The private dining room was small, but elegant, with floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing Manhattan's glittering skyline. Candlelight flickered across the white tablecloth. The whole space looked romantic enough to make someone cry, though not for the reasons the restaurant intended. I sat down, smoothed my dress, and placed my hands in my lap, trying to tame the trembling. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was prepared. And that felt foreign after decades of living under uncertainty disguised as stability. Richard arrived 5 minutes late, smelling like cologne and confidence. He kissed my cheek and sat opposite me, unaware that tonight was the night his two worlds would collide. "You look beautiful, Mags," he said warmly. This was a good idea. Thank you, I replied. I thought it was time for a family dinner. He smiled, oblivious. Just the two of us? Before I could answer, the door opened. Julia stepped inside. Richard's smile cracked, not fell. Cracked, like porcelain struck just hard enough to make a line. Richard, she said softly. Behind her came Grace, holding little Noah's, her son's, hand. His backpack had tiny planets printed across it, a cheerful detail that didn't belong in this kind of room. My husband froze. If shock had a smell, it would have filled the air. He looked between Julia and me, like his eyes couldn't focus fast enough to keep up with reality. Then he muttered, "What? What is this?" "A family dinner," I said calmly. "All of your family." He swallowed hard. "Maggie, I can explain." Grace stepped forward. "So can we." He took a shaky breath and tried to stand, but little Noah hugged his leg with complete, innocent trust. Richard sat back down as if gravity had betrayed him. Julia's voice trembled. "Why didn't you tell us she was still in your life? Why did you tell us she left you?" For a moment, he said nothing. A man who had spent 30 years talking his way out of anything was suddenly unable to form a sentence. I slid the folder onto the table. He stared at it like it was a live grenade. "What's that?" he whispered. "The truth," I said. I opened it and laid out each piece gently, like evidence in a quiet courtroom. The Tiffany receipt, the flower order, the bank transfers, the forged signature, the real estate documents, the Brooklyn payments, all of it. Under the soft candlelight, the papers looked almost delicate. Lies always do until you touch them. Richard's face drained of color. "Maggie, wait, you don't understand." "No," I said softly. "I understand perfectly." The door opened again. A man in a dark suit stepped in. He wasn't dramatic, no badge flash, no handcuffs. He simply nodded politely. "Mr. Collins," he said, "I'm here to ask you to cooperate with questioning regarding discrepancies in your financial filings." Richard's jaw dropped. You called them?" "I didn't have to," I replied. "Your paperwork did." Even little Noah seemed to sense the gravity and stepped closer to his mother. Julia pressed a hand to her chest. Grace stared at the table, understanding now the size of the lie she'd been living under. Richard looked at me then, with something I hadn't seen in years. Fear. And maybe for the first time in 30 years, he saw me clearly. Richard didn't go home with me that night. He left the restaurant with the investigator, walking, not handcuffed, but still looking like a man who had forgotten how to breathe. For a second, I almost felt pity. Then I remembered 30 years of lies, and the pity evaporated like steam from a kettle. Julia, Grace, and I stood together outside the restaurant under the glow of the Fifth Avenue lights. It was oddly peaceful. The city hummed, taxis rushed by, holiday wreaths swayed in the cold wind. Somewhere nearby, a saxophonist was playing a jazzy version of Silent Night, which felt morally confusing but sonically pleasant. Julia wiped her eyes. "I don't know what we do now." Grace held her son close. "I don't know what to tell him." I didn't know the answers either, but I knew this: we weren't alone anymore in our confusion. "Tonight was hard," I said gently. "But it was the truth, and that matters." Julia looked at me with something like weary gratitude. "You didn't have to include us." "I did," I replied, "because he made us all part of the same story. We deserve to hear it." Little Noah tugged on my coat sleeve. "Are you going to yell at Grandpa?" I startled. Kids have a supernatural talent for asking the questions adults choke on. "Well," I said, kneeling a bit, "grown-ups don't always need yelling to learn a lesson." Grace whispered, "Some do." I almost laughed. Julia gently pulled him back. "Honey, Grandpa will be busy for a little while." "With homework?" he asked. Grace sighed. "Yes, very grown-up homework." I smiled, despite everything. Children are mercifully literal. They don't know how tangled adults can become when they forget how to love honestly. We said goodbye by the sidewalk. Grace hugged me carefully like she wasn't sure I'd want it, but I did. For all the pain, she hadn't done anything wrong. She was another casualty of a lie built over decades. When I got home, the house felt different. Not empty, just mine again. The air felt lighter, as if it finally remembered it didn't belong to a secret. I poured myself a small glass of wine and stood in the living room, looking around at the life I had curated. The soft lighting, the familiar scent of vanilla candles, the art he never understood, but I always loved. My world hadn't shattered, it had expanded. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Noah. I know tonight was overwhelming. Please let me know if you need anything tomorrow. We'll start organizing paperwork. I typed. Thank you. And thank you for helping me not fall apart. He replied almost instantly. You didn't look like you were falling apart. You looked like someone choosing herself. The words landed somewhere deep, somewhere long neglected. I sat down, holding the phone loosely, feeling a warm ache in my chest I hadn't felt in years. Not romantic, just seen, respected. It was like oxygen after years of breathing through a thin straw. The next morning I woke up before sunrise, made coffee, wrapped myself in a soft cardigan, and looked outside at the frost blanketing the lawn. For the first time, the silence didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like possibility. Richard called around 8 a.m. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. He called again and again. Finally, he sent a message. Maggie, please. I need to talk to you. I ignored it. 10 minutes later, another message appeared. I'm sorry for everything. Please don't ruin my life. I exhaled a long, tired breath. He still didn't understand. I typed back one sentence. You did that yourself. Then I turned off the phone and reached for my coat. I had an appointment downtown with Noah to begin sorting through the wreckage of my marriage. And strangely, I wasn't dreading it. You can grieve a life while stepping into a new one at the same time. At 58, I was finally learning how. The weeks that followed didn't feel like a collapse. They felt like a slow remodeling of my entire life. Walls came down, beams were replaced, sunlight reached corners I'd forgotten existed. Richard's investigation moved fast. Too fast for him, not fast enough for the women he'd deceived. Financial records, forged signatures, tax inconsistencies. His 30-year balancing act toppled like a stack of cards built on wet paper. He tried calling, texting, bargaining, even guilt-tripping. He said things like, "We can still fix this, and you don't understand how much stress I've been under." I stopped replying the moment I realized every sentence he sent could be rewritten as, "I don't want consequences." One afternoon, he showed up at the house unannounced. I saw his silhouette through the glass pane of the front door. Slumped shoulders, messy hair, desperation in the curve of his stance. The old me would have opened the door. The new me sat quietly on the couch, sipping tea, waiting for him to give up. He knocked for 10 full minutes. At one point, he even tried peering through the side window, which made me duck behind the couch like a teenager, avoiding a persistent neighbor selling vitamins. Eventually, he left. And when the silence returned, I felt lighter. Noah became a constant presence. Not in an intrusive way, but in a way that felt steady. We worked through documents, organized timelines, contacted accountants. He never spoke poorly of Richard. He let the evidence do that on its own. And he never treated me like a victim. More like a partner walking through a storm she didn't cause, but refused to drown in. One afternoon, after hours of paperwork, he looked up from his MacBook and said, "You know, you're surprisingly funny for someone going through a financial crisis." I blinked at him. Is that a compliment? It is, he said, smiling. Dark humor is a survival skill. Well, I replied, I'm practically Olympic level at this point. He laughed, a warm, real laugh that filled the room. I hadn't realized how long it had been since laughter didn't feel like borrowed air. When the legal dust began to settle, Richard faced what he feared most, losing control. He wasn't arrested dramatically, no sirens, no cameras. But he was charged with fraud, forced to turn over assets, and suspended from his firm pending further investigation. His carefully constructed world shrank to the size of the consequences he'd spent decades avoiding. As for me, I wasn't interested in revenge. I wanted closure, and I wanted my life back. Grace and Julia rebuilt their own world too. We met sometimes, coffee, walks, quiet conversations where grief and humor blended into something almost therapeutic. The strangest part? We became connected. Not by him, but by honesty. Months later, on a mild spring afternoon, Noah asked if I wanted to get lunch without paperwork. I hesitated, not because I didn't want to, but because I'd forgotten what it felt like to be wanted, simply for being myself. We walked through Central Park, sunlight filtering through the new leaves. Children chased bubbles, couples lounged on blankets, and the city buzzed with its usual symphony of ambition and optimism. At one point, Noah paused. You look lighter these days, he said. I feel lighter, I admitted. It's strange. At my age, you don't expect new beginnings. He smiled gently. Why not? You're not done. I made a small noise, half laugh, half disbelief. You say that like you're certain? I am. He handed me a small paper bag. Open it. Inside was a simple leather bookmark, soft, worn, handcrafted. On it was a single engraved word. Begin. I traced the letters slowly. Not a love confession, not a promise, just an invitation. Thought you might need a reminder, he said. I didn't cry, but my chest warmed in a way it hadn't in years. A pull toward something new, something still forming, something gently hopeful. Life doesn't give you do-overs, but it does give you chapters. And this one, unexpected, unplanned, felt like the first page of a story I finally got to write alone. As we walked deeper into the blooming park, I felt something loosen inside me, a softness, a beginning. At 58, I wasn't starting over. I was starting finally. Spring eased into summer the way healing eases into a wounded heart. Quietly, without announcement, without asking permission. One morning, I woke to birdsong drifting through the open window and realized something simple but extraordinary. I wasn't waking up from something anymore. I was waking up into something. My days found new rhythm. Slow breakfasts on the porch. Walks through the park where the sunlight touched my shoulders like an old friend. Evenings spent reading on my couch, the same couch where I once cried silently so Richard wouldn't hear. Now it held me without heaviness. I wasn't lonely. I was alone. And the difference felt like oxygen. Grace sent photos sometimes, little Noah learning to ride a bike, Julia smiling again after months of quiet rebuilding. Watching them heal felt like watching a garden regrow after a long winter. Life continues when we choose truth, even if it hurts first. Noah called occasionally, not as an attorney, not as a rescuer, but as someone who enjoyed the sound of my voice. We talked about books, music, the city, moments from our childhood that shaped us. He never rushed anything, just let things unfold naturally, like two people walking along the same path at a comfortable pace. One evening, he asked if I wanted to visit the River Cafe, a place I'd always admired from afar. I said yes, not because I needed romance to feel alive, but because I finally felt allowed to say yes to things that made me feel seen. When I stood with him under the soft glow of Brooklyn's lights, Manhattan sparkling across the water, I understood something I missed while loving the wrong person for 30 years. Life doesn't end when a marriage ends. Life ends only when we stop opening doors. And at 58, my doors were opening everywhere. I wasn't starting over. I was simply starting where I should have been all along.